Good morning. Welcome to the Light on Suitability podcast. Thank you for joining in, listening to us later. We really appreciate that. My name is Elizabeth Comeau. I'm an attorney. I help eligible parolees navigate their way to the parole hearing and hopefully suitability for lots of them. And also success after the fact, which is why my former client is here, successfully got granted parole, successfully navigating his first few months, weeks on parole. And of course, my very good friend and co-host, Joseph Haytas. He's the author of 36 Strategies of Suitability. That's what we're talking about in a series of shows. And my client, Gavlik, is here to help us add some real reality to the discussions and take it out of the theoretical to the, practical stuff, because he has obviously internalized his self-help and became a better person and was able to show that to the board at his last hearing. So that's why it's invaluable for us to have him with us today. How are you guys doing, Joe?
Just happy to have another day here on Earth.
That's all we can hope for. And then Mr. Gavlik, Michael, I don't know why I keep calling you that. What's going on?
Mike's fine. Yeah.
You have got a lot of stuff going on this week. You were talking to us about the homeless project that you've got, the social media promotion that you're trying to do. Tell us about that.
Well, this last week I walked about 40 miles around downtown Los Angeles, Skid Row, South Central, and it just kind of hit me. Even though people talk about the homeless problem in the news, it's one of the biggest things that people are talking about, that they're talking about it, but they're ignoring it at the same time. And it's going to be my project to get some of those voices out there, get some of those stories out there, and show people what's going on just 100 feet away from the fancy high rises and the beautiful downtown. I want people to become aware that, people suffering from addiction and mental health issues that are living in these homeless encampments need our help. They don't need us just to turn our backs on
them. Thank you for that. And I'm on my own here at the farm, so if I have interruptions, please forgive me. Please get just chat amongst yourselves or whatever. But we are here to specifically talk about Joe's book at 36 Strategies, as I mentioned, and we are on Strategy 9, Internalization of Self-Help, Become the Better You. Joe, in his book, always has a really great quote at the beginning, and I always enjoy those. Remember that experience creates internalization. Doing things repeatedly leads to internalization, which produces a quality of understanding that is generally vastly superior to intellectualized learning. A little bit complicated in a way, but I totally get the quote. Ray Dalio.
Ray Dalio? Yeah.
Dalio. Joe, you got to fix the spelling in the book.
Yeah, I'll check on that. I thought it was right off to.
Remember, I have the
old spell checker.
Remember, I have the old version too, so it might have been corrected already. So internalization, he talks about this up front. And one of the things he does in this chapter is he actually cut and paste something from a couple of different excerpts from transcripts. So internalization, he defines as concepts, strategies, and pro-social skills learned in self-help, counseling, and spiritual endeavors that one incorporates into their daily life to overcome past shortcomings, a concept that we learn in 12 steps that we talked about the last two shows, negative conduct, and ultimately leading to becoming a better human being. We all could do that, actually. And we as we go through the book, he's got more samples from transcripts, which is excellent. And it is so important because the panel will not rely solely on your writings, because they never really know if you just wrote them or if you've internalized them, and they say, look, you just can't bring out your 9-page essay on internalization of what you've learned when you're in the midst of some sort of issue. Generally, you might be able to refresh yourself or keep yourself, engaged or immersed in what you've learned, but on the fly it might not be useful. And they also want to guard against somebody, I don't know, for lack of a better word, cheating and submitting a whole bunch of paperwork that sounds good, but they really don't know what's in the paperwork, which is one of the biggest things. So why don't I start with Joe and talk about, shed some further light on that. And then let's move to Mike about, how that works, how that actually works.
About internalization.
Mm-hmm.
It's like riding a bicycle. You can read about it all you want and study it, but until you get on the bike and actually do it, and then do it some more and keep doing it, and then it becomes automatic. It's like a new concept. You're forming basically a new brain path and a new habit to change from the past. Applying it to you, yourself. I think the most important thing is, let me just take a half step back. It's like playing the piano. When the first time you play, you consciously hit the keys to play a scale. But, over time, you can play Beethoven's Ninth, and then you could play it while having a conversation with somebody because you've internalized everything about Beethoven's Ninth. And it becomes automatic. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to read your relapse prevention plan at the hearing because you know it so well. You live it basically. And it's become part of your new behavior, which is a positive new behavior, as opposed to in the past when someone may have gone for substances when they were stressed out. Now they do something else, a relaxation technique, avoidance, replacing it with something else, whatever. But this is what they've learned and internalized to become, more pro-social, a better person, whatever you want to call it. And so that's my take on internalization. We can't hear you, Elizabeth. You're muted.
Before we turn it over to Mike as well to add his points, I wanted to say that, I liked you mentioned you can't memorize your way out of prison. You have to internalize your way out, which you do talk about in the book. And one of the examples you talked about in the book too, about how do I internalize something, just like you said about the driving example in your book, you use the manual transmission, how to learn how to drive stick shift, right? And I remember that when my first husband taught me how to drive a stick shift. He made me sit in the car and learn how to not ride the clutch. Okay, because if you ride the clutch, you're just going to wear out a bunch of stuff. And then you just put the clutch. He made me put the clutch in, shift, put the clutch out, shift. We sat there in the parking lot like 30 minutes. Shift, shift, shift. And it was tricky because your mind is starting to learn a skill. And like you described it in the book, okay, that day I'm going to learn that, And then the next day we did another skill, and it's skill building as well. So Mike, take it away.
All right. Well, and what Joseph was saying about internalization is so true. Leading up to my last board, I spent, I think I mentioned this last week, maybe 6 hours studying material to get ready for board for 6 months. And that's because I was learning a new concept. And then once I spent that 6 hours on it, I went out and practiced it. I didn't take a piece of paper with me to reference back to. I already had all that knowledge. Now I put it into practice, started learning how to use these tools on a daily basis, how to live them. And, you know, it kind of broke my heart. There was a guy that studied and studied and studied 12 hours a day, 6 months before he went to board, trying to make sure he had all these concepts down and memorized. Then he got a denial. He didn't just get a denial, he got a 5-year denial because he didn't internalize.
Oh, that hurts.
And
just listening to that.
And it's not that he didn't know the material, but that's not what the board wants. You can sit down with a room full of monkeys with typewriters and come up with, you know, the works of Shakespeare. But, you know, that doesn't help internalize anything. What it takes is sitting there practicing this stuff in your daily life. And that's the point I try to get across to you. It's like, yeah, I never see you out here studying this stuff. It's like, because there's no need. If you live it, you don't have to study it. You know, I talked last time about self-help being a bit selfish. I use my selfish time in self-help to learn the principles. And then I jump right to step 12 once I've got the principles down and I've been practicing and I'm comfortable practicing my principles. And then I give it away, because that's what really helped me internalize, is giving all these lessons away. I mean, I have decades worth of lessons about internalization, about growth, about healing, about forgiveness, about accountability, about, you know, looking back at my contributing and causative factors. You know, I didn't get all this information into practice by sitting down at a table just studying it hours a day. You know, I got it by living it and reliving it. And, you know, I guarantee you that reliving the past is not an easy thing. But we have to do that. Because if we can't relive our past and see what contributed to the decisions we made and what caused us to be in that criminal mindset where we see it as a weakness to ask for help, then we're never going to internalize it. We're never going to be accountable. And honestly, we're just never going to grow. And, you know, I have this belief, when I stop learning and I stop growing is when I start dying. And, you know, I've got a long life ahead of me, so I keep learning. So.
For sure, for sure. And the other thing is, it's like repetition is the key to mastery. Again, you go out and you say, okay, I learned this skill about saying I'm sorry. Okay, we'll go out and try it. And it's really difficult. It's really difficult. And even what's more difficult is saying sorry, and maybe it's not really all your fault, or you don't perceive it as your fault. You know, it's probably the other person. He bumped into you. Okay. But in a prison setting, you have to stop, because it will diffuse an angry, aggressive sort of flavor of that moment very quickly by saying, whoa, sorry, buddy. I didn't mean to get in your way like that, you know, and just constantly learning that kind of skill and putting that into practice. I think because a lot of people have a character defect of their ego, their pride, it doesn't allow them to do that. It wants to place blame somewhere else because of that pain threshold that we all have. It's like, to avoid pain, we put everything out here, especially for alcoholics and drug addicts and things like that. And other addictions. Violence is an addiction. Gambling is an addiction. And so that helps us just to put the pain component away from us and stuff like that. So practicing it, other skills that you learn, practicing it, you can practice it by discussing it and saying, hey, do you want to discuss character defects today? What character defect was involved in your crime? Or practicing it by writing it out, journaling. That's why commissioners often will say, journal. You don't have anybody to talk to? Journal. And that's a way of practicing it as well. I'm thinking about going back to your cell or your dorm or whatever the setting is in the moment is, the step 10, sitting down and going, okay, let's assess the day. How'd I do? What happened? How did I interact with that officer, that inmate? Did I fulfill my obligations? Did I meet my did I try and work on my character defect of procrastination or discipline or resistance of authority or whatever it is? And then sitting down and writing that out. And, discipline comes into play on this as well, because you've got to be able to be disciplined enough to work on it and to take a hard look at yourself in terms of, putting things into practice, because that's half the hearing. Wouldn't you guys agree that half the hearing's about discussing what a bad person you were? And so
Yeah.
you've got to be able to, come up with all those character defects. Yeah, I was this, and this. And it's much easier to remember it if you relate it to, hey, why did I stole stuff? Well, then that makes it easy to match that to a character defect: selfish, greedy, entitled, whatever it is, disregard for the rights of others, etc. And you can attach it to all those things, and it just makes it easier at making examples for yourself as well to help you. So putting it into practice, yes, it's like, how do I practice internalization? Because my clients will say, and Joe's clients will often say, okay, I'm going to go back. I'm going to memorize all this stuff before the hearing. I say, you'll be able to recite the steps that way, but you might not be able then to say how you work the steps, because I oftentimes ask my clients, okay, when was the last time you worked the steps? And they go, oh, I was in a group for that. Last year I got a certificate. No, not the answer actually to that question.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we just talked about so-and-so step, last week. We worked on step 4. I go, okay. So how often do you work the steps? Oh, at least every week. And then instantly that you're not internalizing this. I know instantly from talking to them, and then I can use that as the discussion point and say, okay, we have some work to do. So you haven't internalized the 12 steps. Number one, because you would know that how often do we work the steps, Mike?
Daily. Every day, from the time you get up to the time you go to bed.
Yeah. Right. And that's, and then you can relate that to the step that says we do that every day. And step 10 is so critical because it's really pointing to all the steps. Step 10 points you to all the steps. It points you to 1, 2, and 3. It points you to 4, 5, 6, and 7. Because in order for you to think about, okay, let me reflect on my day. Where did I go right? Where did I go wrong? And that sort of thing, you have to be able to use all the steps, because step 8, identify a victim. I guess a victim is a little extreme for maybe somebody that you, I don't know, cut in line or took the extra piece of chicken and didn't ask if he'd wanted or whatever the example is. I don't have the examples so much for prison, but that's step 8, step 9. I mean, 10 is pivotal after you've learned all the steps. And then giving back, have you given back, is an important relationship to 10 as well. So the ability to internalize will get you to step 10. And when those questions are asked, it's just a breeze for my clients that actually live the steps and have made them a lifestyle choice. It's a breeze. It's not, they don't have to sit there going, oh, darn it. Okay, 6. And then you can hear them muttering the steps, because it's your brain, it's just a rote memory at that point, rather than a lifestyle, something they've put into play every single day, as many hours of a day as you possibly can. But it's such a great program when it works if you work it, is what you hear in AA. So
Yeah,
A
and
NA or whatever.
I loved what Michael said too about giving it away. And I believe that's the 12th step about going out and teaching it to others. And if you can teach it, you certainly know it. And we learn by teaching, because we learn like what our weaknesses, what we're not what we totally haven't learned. If we have to teach it, then we rethink it, and hopefully we internalize it then when we teach it. So that's a perfect way to further internalize something. Obviously, you first have to know it, and that's the internalization part. But I think that really makes it more permanent when you're able to teach it.
And absolutely. One of the things that I really want to point out, internalization is more than just knowing it, even knowing it deep in your heart. When I would run self-help groups, and I would run, say, the Pace Life Skills group that I ran for years at Folsom, probably did 30 cycles of it. And there was not a single cycle that I came away not learning something new, not learning something that I'd overlooked. And that's also the important part of step 12 in teaching, is a good teacher is a good student. We have to be open to new ideas. We have to be open to new thoughts.
Yeah.
And we have to put our egos aside. I mean, yeah, I could have gone in there and facilitated all those classes and said, yeah, I know this stuff right and left, just listen to me and you'll be okay.
Yeah.
That's not how it works. I go in there, I would share my life lessons. I would have them share their life. And between us, we'd start figuring things out. And that's how internalization's really got to work. You got to build it. And, we were talking about character defects and the contributing and causative factors. Being able to internalize is understanding. Let's start with our contributing factors. These are the things that happen to us early in life that help us develop certain behaviors, I think is a great term for it. Now, this could be an abusive household as a kid, parents growing up as alcoholics, being around criminals or gangs your whole life, being around violence. These are the things that contributed to us becoming who we were. Now, to fully understand and embrace our recovery and our rehabilitation, we have to understand that these contributing factors, even though they are things that happen to us or happened around us that influenced us, they are not what made us who we are. They're not to blame. They're just stimulus that fed us, and we made the choice somewhere down the road that, this is what I saw, this works for me. It's easy because I'm familiar with it. And that's how we develop our causative factors, things that caused us to commit our crimes. And, a lot of times before I had really internalized the things in my life, my past, my present, the things that I'd done, the things that I even thought, I played the role of the victim. I would look back at the contributing factors in my life, my mother having cancer and being violently aggressive when she was out of remission, my dad being a womanizing alcoholic and very abusive before he left. All the bad breaks I'd had in life. None of it was easy. And it was so easy to say, you know what? That's why I'm who I am. I'm the victim here because I never caught a lucky break. And all I've got to say is, that's a load of crap. Yeah, all those things happened to me. And yes, they influenced the decisions I made because it was easier for me to accept these behaviors because I'd had them my whole life. Okay, But everything in life comes down to a choice. And it was when I made the choice to change and face all this stuff and actually learn the positive aspects of all that hardship and all that abuse. And believe me, there was. I hate to say it, abuse and hardship build character if you let it. But let's take the abuse that I went through as a kid when my mom was out of remission. I protected my brother and sister by sending them to the neighbor's house and taking the beatings 2 or 3 times a week easily. And you know what? My brother grew up to have a great daughter, be a great dad until he passed away. My sister is a great mom, great grandmother. She is one of the most loving, caring people I know. But it's the lessons that I had to look back on that helped me get past all the violence and anger that was involved. It was all the beauty that came out of that. And that really helped me internalize too, because there's always something positive to be found if you look deep enough. And it's that feeds the desire to grow. And that desire to grow helps us get through the pain of all of this. And that's what we got to do. We've got to be willing to sit through the fire to find that one spark of beauty that inspires us to move forward. And it's going to hurt. It really is. I mean, I cried more after I started recovery than I had my entire life.
Mm.
And that's just because I made the choice, again, the choice to sit in the fire and experience it, to internalize it, to feel it. It wasn't about, learning the words. It wasn't about learning the principles of the 12 steps or anything. It was about learning about me. And that's singly the biggest lesson in this is internalization starts with us learning about ourselves. And yeah, we're going to find a lot of things we don't like. I mean, I went through decades of my life just loathing who I was. But by facing that and looking at both the good and bad in my life, you know what? I worked through that. And taking all these programs and all these gifts that people have given me, that they've shared with me, I've been able to rebuild myself. I look in the mirror in the mornings and I can actually smile because I like myself. I love myself. There is not a day goes by. Even in prison, people were asking me, Mike, why are you always smiling? You're so happy. It's like, dude, it's because I know who I am. I know who I was, I know who I've become, and I know who I'm becoming. And that's the gift of internalization. I don't care what the board has to say about any of that. If you internalize it and you do it for yourself, everything else will fall into place. But more importantly, you'll be somebody that you can respect. And that's the most important aspect of it.
That says it all. I mean, wow. I wish you could somehow transpose those thoughts into me when I talk to other incarcerated persons. I mean, that's perfect. That's what it's all about. By the way, that's what it's all about in getting to the gate to get your freedom. I mean, I don't want to say it any other way. I mean, that's obviously a big motivator to want to get out of prison, but it's more important about who you're becoming, because you got to still live with yourself once you get out, and you have to be prepared and learning those things. There's still going to be stressors, obviously, because that's how the world is, but that's preparation so you can get out and not only survive, but to thrive, as you navigate in the free world. So, Michael, wow, that's you hit the nail on the head. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Okay. I couldn't have said it better myself. And it's like, I wish that could come home to every inmate who stays up till 2 a.m. the night before studying, because that's, it's BS. That's not the way it's done. And it's like practice. It takes practice and becoming who you are, and going back and doing the hard work and facing who you were at the time, and finding that out, addressing it. And Michael, you reminded me of somebody I was talking to just this week who committed a terrible crime. And I said, Mr. Haytas, I don't want to go through this. I don't want to talk about the crime at the hearing. I'm trying to get away from it. I'm distancing myself. But I said, okay, you have a legal right not to talk about it if you don't want to. But I kind of took it apart and showed him that without going through that fire, you can't. You're still in avoidance, and you're avoiding your past. And the only way we can confront it is to look it in the face, see who you are. And if you don't know who you are, you can't identify that, who you were in the past, then you're not going to be able to address it in the present. And that's tough, but it's something you got to do. Very well put, Michael.
Thank you. Elizabeth, anything to add?
And Elizabeth, you're still on mute, by the way. Oh, there you go.
I was turning it off so I don't all the farm noises. No, I think all this is so great. Great points. Mike, my husband said you made great points last week. He thought you were a great addition to us, me
Thank
and
you.
Joe, because we're just, ultimately, Joe and I are just the theoretical. We can talk and we can throw advice out there. We can tell clients, oh, you need to internalize, you need to do this and you need to do that. But really, that's all just theory. You have to put it into practice. You have to start doing it. And you guys are really the only ones that actually know, how that works, how that feels, and so on. So, just show up, remind your loved ones, just show up. Like Joe said, earlier today, we were talking off record and I was asking him about the Course in Miracles and if he'd started, and he said, well, I got the book out, and that's okay. That's exactly what we want from our clients. Just get the book out, sign up I signed up. I'm on the waiting list. Okay. All right. That's good. You're on your way. That's the first part of becoming, a changed person and being able to internalize this stuff, because you certainly can internalize what you don't even know or can memorize, obviously. Like you said, I think you mentioned at some point, Mike, I learned the stuff, I studied, and then I started, putting it into place so it would be cemented in my brain. And it's kind of the same with language learning. And I use language learning a lot because language learning, again, is repetition is the key to the mastery there. We have a memory center and we have a language center. And the two of them, you have to get it into the memory center before it goes over to the learning center, or the language center of your brain, where it becomes second nature to think and or speak in a second language. And that's what you're doing, right? Isn't learning about anger, domestic violence, risk factors, triggers, all that stuff. It's all a second language, right? So it's similar, very similar.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of language that goes on in prison. There's the language of the yard, how everybody interacts with each other. And it's really more of a criminal thing than it is a good thing. Then there's the everyday language we speak to each other. Just the common courtesies we at least try to have most of the time. But then there's the language of recovery that is growing by leaps and bounds in prison right now. And that's probably the most important language that we speak in there. And yeah, I mean, it's all based off the language we learn every day from growing up. I mean, how many times have we in Bible study as a kid learned the 10 Commandments, learned the Golden Rule? That's really the basis for all of the things we do in recovery. We can hold to the just basic principles handed down to us by those that are a lot wiser than I am. We can make the world a better place. But there's also a separate recovery dialogue from the one we speak with our peers. It's the one that we live and that we speak with ourselves every day. And we have to listen to what our heart's telling us. And one of the principles that I've learned regarding this is we each have to be aligned, head, heart, and gut. Our head is our intellectual learning center. It's where we process the daily data that we gather in life. The heart is our center for compassion, for anger, for all the emotions we feel. And then the gut, that's just our primal self. It's the one that just needs to be let loose once in a while. But we have to keep these things in balance. So if I'm too much in my head, then I'm ignoring what my heart is telling me. I'm ignoring the things that my gut is telling me may be wrong. If I'm too much in my heart, then I'm not giving myself a chance to really make an informed decision. And the other side of that is it may fuel my gut into just going haywire and lashing out at something because I'm too involved in my emotions. And then if I get too deep into my primal self, my gut, then I stop thinking and I stop feeling. And I end up that monster that I was 26 years ago. So, we have to keep these aspects of us in balance. It's a lot like the 8 dimensions of wellness. One gets out of balance, everything else starts to suffer a little bit. And if we can't, keep a good, solid dialogue with ourselves, then internalization is not possible. Healing is not possible. Forgiveness is not possible. Because we're not listening to the lessons and that little voice inside that's saying, hey, this is the right thing to do. Stay away from that because that's going to hurt a lot of people. And that's, I think, the biggest problem that a lot of us have getting into recovery, or I hate to say it, the ones that are just getting ready for board. Yeah. They don't really care about the recovery aspect of it. It's more, okay, well, I'm getting ready for board. I need to learn this. Mm-hmm. And then they listen to the yard dialogue and they're out there chasing whatever drug or alcohol or gambling or whatever it is because they embrace that yard dialogue, that criminal self. And they ignore that person inside of them saying, hey, this is not right. This is hurting somebody. And like a perfect example, back when I was still gambling in prison on a regular basis, I didn't take into the fact that win or lose, I was victimizing somebody. I wasn't internalizing that. So if I won, well, the guy that I took all of his money, well, I took his money, and let's face it, that money probably wasn't his, it was his family's. So what did they go without just so he could have that money to gamble away, put in my pocket? So by that action, I victimized that person and his family. but on the other side of the coin, say I lost. Well, I just victimized my family because, they're the ones that sent me the money and stuff that I was gambling with anyway. So what did they have to do with that? And it's being able to internalize even little lessons like this that make a big difference in our transition from the criminal thinker into the person that's living in denial, into the addict, into becoming something whole and complete, a genuine, caring, honest person. And, some people try to fake it just to get through the board. But if you're not doing it for yourself and for the ones you love and for the people you've hurt, and you're just doing it to go to board, you're spinning your wheels, man.
Mm.
You're spinning your wheels. And like Elizabeth said last week, sometimes people skate through by sheer, it's been a long day. They just want to be over, or the person, can blow smoke out their ass 9 different ways and impress the board, which rarely happens, but it does happen once in a while. I mean, yeah, there's those that slide through, but the majority of people that are just sitting there spinning their wheels are getting these 3, 5, 7, 10-year denials right and left. And it's because they're not doing the work in internalizing. They're not feeling it. They're not growing. They're not listening to their inner self. There's just so much that goes on behind the scenes when we're doing this. And, there was a time where, I was going to self-help classes, and there were people coming from the streets that were teaching them that had never been in a prison before they started doing this. And they actually weren't addicts. They weren't criminal thinkers. They weren't any of this. They were just like grad students and things like that. And, part of me is just like, okay, why should I listen to this person? They have no experience. Well, I'm here telling you right now, I have the experience. Listen. And listen to these people that are talking to you, because they may not have the same experience I have, but they've been doing it a hell of a long time. And they know what they're talking about. I mean, even as much as I internalized and worked hard to get to where I am, before I went to my hearing, Elizabeth jerked a knot in my head a couple of times and helped me realize a couple of things that I really needed to focus on. So I went back, studied a little bit, started practicing and learning it and living it. And it helped. So, I'm giving, this to whoever's out there listening. I've been there. I have the experience that, these two may not have, and they have a lot of experience I don't. And between all of us, we're going to give you the best chance of success. Bottom line.
And that just plays back into the 12 steps again. It's take what you need and leave the rest. And a lot of these people that do come from the outside, they may or may not have been to prison. They may or may not have had to. They usually have had to fight their way out of addiction, but usually they have been teaching it over and over, and they are listening to people struggling with whatever their problems are over and over. And so they can get a good rote sense of what's going on and what people need to keep pressing on. But ultimately, a good sponsor, a good support person who, misery loves company kind of thing. Like, it's good to talk to another alcoholic about drinking, because if you try and talk to somebody who's not a drinker about, man, I feel like drinking today, my dog died and I feel like drinking, it's really not going to help you to go to somebody who's never battled with alcoholism to solve that problem. They're not going to be able to say to you the things that you need to hear again, because you know them, but in the moment when you're stressed and you're triggered, you really need someone to say, okay, wait, okay, fine. You're going to take a drink and that's going to help you perhaps in the moment. True. But have you thought it farther ahead. And also, that grieving process, it's hard, and go through the steps with yourself, and be gentle and be forgiving of yourself, and sit in the fire and just feel the pain of loss. And somebody who can really do that, they have to be both empathetic, be able to, mirror your feelings, validate your feelings, and whatever else skill that healthy communication has. And then to be able to say, okay, and by the way, have you remembered the consequences after? I know you probably have, but let's talk about the consequences. Let's talk about the grief. Let's talk about, remember time. Time is a good healer of things. It's a lot better than a quick shot of tequila or whatever the pain management method is. So having someone to talk to, I think, is key. That, does have to be a person with those experiences or have lived those experiences.
If I could just draw an analogy to this, I look at it like, those people who just study for the sake of, they think they're going to tell the commissioners everything they know about programming. It's about knowing, not only knowing, it's like music. You know all the words, but you don't have the beat. You don't feel the beat. So you got to have both. And it's a balance. Like Michael was saying, between the head, the heart, and the gut. Well, keep everything in balance, but also knowing the concepts of self-help and practicing them. That's the music. You can know all the words, but you don't have the beats and know the dance, know the rhythm. So you got to have both, and just having one or the other is not going to work. You got to know the words and the music and feel it inside.
100%. Thank you for that, Joe. That's an excellent place probably to end. I'm trying to be respectful of both of your schedules, and I got to go feed some pigs and chickens. So I am going to just finalize everything. If you like the content, you can hit like and subscribe. It's not really necessary. Comments would be really great. We would love those. Topics for conversation that we can incorporate into our book study that we're doing with Joe. And hopefully we see Mike back here, because he's got such great, literally the inside view of everything that Joe and I don't have. We've got we have a good perspective and an educated perspective, but we don't certainly have hands-on with, other than doing our own self-help. And I fully expect Joe to be versed in the Course in Miracles by next week.
Okay.
The whole 600-page treatise or whatever it is.
I'll be reading it instead of watching fireworks on the 4th.
Oh, okay.
And I'll have to put off, the Twilight Zone marathon too. So.
Oh, no. I love the Twilight. I wish they had the Twilight Zone in Spanish. But Mike, have another successful week.
Oh, yes.
Joe,
Will do. Absolutely.
hopefully I don't have to call you on next week with some kind of crisis.
No, you can call me for any reason. It's always good to hear from you.
Like, Joe, guess what happened? He's like, oh no, what happened? And then he was like, oh no.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, those roads are tricky. And then it's like, what is someone going to say? Well, pay attention. It's like, of course.
Sometimes it's harder when you're grieving, though.
Oh.
Yeah, I felt like okay, but I have it kind of just, it fogs up your whole brain for a while. Several months, I think. I thought it would be hopefully getting past it quicker. But anyway, thank you for tuning in. Thank you both for coming. I really enjoy seeing you on Sunday. It's a lot of fun to just, talk, chat, whatever. Go off on a tangent sometimes. Sometimes Joe and I go on a lot more tangents. You help us to keep on target here. So that's been really great.
You do, Michael. You do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed this the past couple of weeks, and I'm looking forward to more.
Okay. Oh, and by the way, Joe, strategy 10, become the better you, is next.
Okay, fantastic.
Should be a great, become a better you. That's what I'm trying to do last.
I think we all are, no matter where we're at in life.
Lifelong journey at that.
Amen.
So,
Fantastic. Thanks to you both.
you're welcome.